ride down here got me thinking about how we get so hung up on certain bikes and we go lusting after them and chasing them, and how we can put an awful lot of effort into getting a particular bike, and then it turns out to not to be as good as we thought it was going to be. Sometimes it's a disappointment. Sometimes the chase is more fun than actually buying the bike. Whereas on other occasions we come by a bike by chance. I got a phone call from a mate in the trade alerting me to a bike in bits for sale, and I went and saw this chap, and the bike in bits for sale turned out to be a BMW RS. The entire bike arrived disassembled, but luckily the frame, tank and wheels had been powder coated, so the rebuild began immediately. Fortunately, the engine had been carefully stored complete, and once refitted ran perfectly. The lovely silver blue colour was present on the mudguard and seat, so the tank and fairing were painted to match. The non-standard red and white pinstripes were added too. I've always admired the R100RS, but they're rather expensive now, so my 100S conversion will have to do me just fine. With the lockdowns lifting towards the summer of 2021, the urge to do a decent ride took hold. The top of Scotland, a place that I'd never been, became my target destination. The plan to ride to Durness and back to Pembrokeshire, taking as many great roads as possible. Conquering Wales by mid-afternoon in decent weather, a sinister gloom turned slowly into rain on the approach to the M6, however. The relatively short stretch of motorway was horrendous, with nose-to-tail lorries throwing up a monsoon of spray, but the ever-dependable Boxer Lump powered on remorselessly, appearing to enjoy the attrition. Relief came at Lancaster. Taking a right turn into the Yorkshire Dales, immediately the bike felt more at home, in a landscape that seemed to match its 1979 vintage. Heading out from Kirkby Stephen in the morning, it was sunny and warm, and as I bounced across the elevated moorlands and trickled through pretty villages, I considered the BMW's best features. Comfort is definitely its ace card. The flat dual seat is all-day comfortable, with the riding position spreading body weight evenly across the usual pressure points. The full RS fairing is a superb design and would have been hugely appreciated while on the M6 in the deluge, but for all other situations, I'm content with the S bikini fairing. I left the Yorkshire Dales and bowled along the fabulous A68 with its huge troughs and crests, where the front end goes light before you plunge down the next drop. With a degree of elation, I made the Scottish border at Carter Bar. I rode onward through Edinburgh and over the Forth Bridge, diving into the Cairngorms at Perth, where I rolled through the beautiful Glenshee Valley and stopped to Wildcamp just before Braemar. Parked by a lovely babbling river, with the sun sliding out of view behind the majestic mountainous backdrop, life felt good. Awakened early by the sunrise peeping over the mountaintops, I headed off in glorious sunshine, taking the A93, the B976 and then the A939 towards Inverness. A route filled with fabulous mountain scenery and delightful roads. As Inverness faded into the distance, the route through the centre became increasingly wild and remote. The tiny road linking Altnahara with Hope is fabulously detached, terminating at the coast where gale force winds awaited my arrival. This miniature stronghold is called a broch, a fortified dwelling from the era of the warring clans. Durness was hectic, the shop almost empty of food, and the campsite was reminiscent of a superbike weekend at Brands Hatch. So I decided to head south. The weather turned nasty though, with rain joining forces with the gale, but as I entered the village of Scurry, a chippy van drew me in like a moth to a lamp. The ladies serving delicious fish and chips pointed me in the direction of a B&B just around the corner. No bike is perfect, of course, and Beamers are known for their quirks. On this trip, it was the side stand that became the focus of my frustration. Having to lean a fully loaded bike away from yourself while swinging out a skinny metal bar that flicks back if you misjudge placing the end is not exactly what a hungry, tired and wet biker needs. The blend of coastal and mountain scenery and winding, undulating roads makes the west coast of Scotland a biking nirvana. The road to Applecross is quite narrow in places and best tackled in low season. However, the views across to Rarsay and Skye are absolutely worth the detour. From my night stop at Scurry to Applecross and over the famous Pass of the Cattle, I powered along, camping at Dorney that evening. Dorney has the gorgeous Eilean Donan Castle on its shoreline, one of the most recognisable castles in Scotland. Next morning I had to pack up in the gloom of a sea mist. I headed south through a very busy Fort William and then in bright sunshine along the sparkling coast down the western side of the Mull of Kintyre. As I arrived at Westport Beach, the mist really did roll in from the sea. On the very pretty east coast, the sun reappeared, giving a Mediterranean feel to the rest of my evening ride. That evening, while camping in a sheltered cove with a panoramic view of the Isle of Arran, reminded me of a holiday there as a child in the 1970s. The ferry to Loch Ramsar early in the morning allowed time to climb Goat Fell, the highest point on the island. It's said that Arran is like a miniature version of Scotland, and from this vantage point I can see why. Goat Fell is a reasonably tough climb from certain directions. On a clear day the views are phenomenal. That night I wild camped at a place where we did the same when I was just a kid back in 1979. Next day was a sightseeing tour around this paradise island. Arran must be one of Scotland's best kept secrets. After a second relaxing day on Arran, I caught the ferry to Ardrossan. After just over a week's riding, I noticed the oil level required a top up. Having toured the stunning roads of Yorkshire and Scotland, I now put the BM into gallop mode and headed home south along the A76, reaching Wales by late evening. A final night at Llangollen. Welcome to Wales, everybody. And then a straightforward run down familiar roads back to my house.